Africa's history is sometimes underappreciated or misrepresented, leading to stereotypes that paint Africans and their descendants in a negative light. However, these views are not based on facts and are influenced by racial prejudices. Did you know these facts? Thales, a preeminent figure in Greek intellectual history, spent his formative years in Africa, where he was educated by African priests. This profound influence is evidenced by historical texts such as those from the Greek historian Iamblichus, who noted that Thales's wisdom, which made him famous in Greece, was acquired from the priests of Memphis and Diospolis in Egypt. In fact, concepts like the Thales theorem were already known in Egypt, 1100 years before Thales himself, as documented in the Rhind papyrus from Egypt's Middle Kingdom. Thales recognized the wealth of knowledge in Africa, advising his protege, Pythagoras, to seek education there as well. Pythagoras followed in Thales's footsteps, enduring many challenges and even performing menial tasks to gain the trust and knowledge of the African priests. After 19 years, his dedication paid off, and he was initiated into deep and significant teachings. Hippocrates, often dubbed the father of medicine, is known to have based much of his work on earlier writings from Egyptian sources, such as those from the library of Imhotep, an ancient Egyptian who predated him by over 2 millennia. Plato, another pillar of Greek thought, spent 13 years in Heliopolis, now known as Ionu, absorbing the teachings of African priests. His work on subjects like numerology and cosmology is heavily derived from Egyptian teachings, although this is seldom acknowledged in traditional accounts of his legacy. The case of Archimedes further illustrates this pattern of borrowing. After the Greek invasion of Egypt, Archimedes had access to a vast repository of Egyptian knowledge, which influenced much of his work, including his famous hydraulic screw, as noted by the historian Diodorus Siculus. Paul Verhaeghe, who wrote extensively about Archimedes, was puzzled by how Archimedes reached his complex conclusions, noting that he often demonstrated propositions through a method of double reduction to the absurd without fully explaining his processes. This has led some to speculate that Archimedes may have borrowed ideas from Egyptian sources and omitted several steps in his mathematical proofs. Notably, the Moscow Papyrus, a document from Kemet, which predates Archimedes by 2,000 years, contains a problem related to calculating the surface area of a sphere. That suggests earlier Egyptian knowledge of concepts later attributed to Archimedes, indicating possible plagiarism. Even the very concept of philosophy has roots in African intellectual traditions. The term itself derives from the Greek word phi, which is linked to the Egyptian reverence for the number 1.6, a number they considered sacred. Indeed, the design of the Great Pyramids in Egypt incorporated the mathematical concepts of pi and phi, which later influenced Greek architecture, including the Parthenon. Phidias, a Greek sculptor and mathematician who lived from around 500 BC to 432 BC, is known for integrating the phi ratio, also known as the golden ratio, into his sculptures at the Parthenon, demonstrating its aesthetic appeal. Plato, writing between 428 BC and 347 BC, discussed the significance of the golden ratio in his work Timaeus, where he described it as a fundamental mathematical relationship integral to the structure of the cosmos. While he did not use the term golden ratio, as we know it now, he emphasized its importance in understanding natural science and cosmology. This historical overview challenges the conventional narrative of the Greek miracle by highlighting the substantial and often uncredited contributions of African knowledge to Greek scholarship. The legacy of African influence is evident across various fields, from mathematics and science to philosophy and medicine. Africa is widely recognized as the birthplace of humanity. About 200,000 years ago, the oldest known modern humans appeared in Africa. Today, it's understood that all people, regardless of race, descended from these early African ancestors. In 2007, Professor W. Curtis Marine and his team discovered shells and other artifacts in prehistoric caves at Pinnacle Point near Mossel Bay. These artifacts, dating back to between 164,000 and 174,000 years ago, provide evidence of the sophisticated behavior of early modern humans in Africa. Research at the Pinnacle Point caves in South Africa shows that early humans were already engaged in activities like fishing. They collected shells from the shoreline up to 10 kilometers away and brought them back to the cave to eat. The discovery of hematite in the cave suggests they also used this mineral to create body paint, indicating an early form of artistic expression. In Mpumalanga, South Africa, there are ruins of what might be one of the oldest cities, built by modern humans, with some estimates dating it between 75,000 to 200,000 years old. These ruins suggest that early humans had developed stone architecture long before many other civilizations. Notably, the site features symbols like the Ankh cross and the sun, elements of spirituality that would appear much later in ancient Egyptian culture. Additionally, the site known as Adam's calendar might represent one of the earliest astronomical calendars, evidenced by megalithic stones arranged to track the movements of the stars. At the Blombos Cave, also in South Africa, researchers have found some of the earliest known cave paintings and drawings, including geometric shapes dated to about 75,000 years ago. These findings suggest that humans were creating art with symbolic meanings tens of thousands of years before similar discoveries in Europe. According to a study by researchers Ralph Kittler, Manfred Kaiser, and Mark Stoneking from the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany, the first modern humans to leave Africa were likely wearing clothes. Their research, which focused on the DNA of lice living on humans, revealed insights into the origin of clothing. They found that the differentiation between head lice, which live on the scalp, and body lice, which live in clothing and feed on the body, indicates that clothing was invented around 72,000 years ago in Africa. This innovation was crucial for human migration, providing the necessary protection to survive in varied climates. Furthermore, the discovery of the Lebombo bone between South Africa and Eswatini, dated to about 37,000 years ago, suggests that early humans in Africa were also pioneers in mathematics. This bone, potentially a lunar calendar, represents one of the earliest known instances of numerical calculation, marking a significant development in human history. In 1950, Belgian archaeologist Jean de Heinzelin de Brocourt made a groundbreaking discovery in the Ishango region of what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. He found a bone known as the Ishango bone on the shores of Lake Edward. This small bone, measuring just over 10 centimeters, is marked with notches that suggest it was used for mathematical calculations, dating back about 25,000 years. This find, now housed at the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Sciences, highlights Africa's role as a pioneer in mathematics. The development of tools also underscores Africa's historical significance. The microlithic industry, which involves making small stone tools, began in South Africa around 50,000 BC, much earlier than in Western Europe, where similar tools date back only to about 10,000 years ago. This was confirmed by Professor Denis Vialou of the Institute of Human Paleontology in Paris. Agriculture is another area where Africa led early. Research by Professor Fred Wendorf of the University of Dallas indicates that people in Nubia were practicing advanced agriculture at least 14,000 years ago. His discoveries in 1973 also revealed that the first urbanized and developed cities were established in the Nile Valley, particularly in the Nabta Playa region, around 9,000 years ago. This evidence suggests that Nile Valley civilization predates commonly accepted historical timelines. Moreover, Africa's contributions to civilization include the development of writing. Contrary to the long-held belief that writing originated in Mesopotamia, excavations led by Professor Gunther Dreyer in Egypt in 1998 revealed that the earliest known writing comes from the Nile Valley, dating back to at least 3400 BC. These findings affirm Africa's central role in the origins and advancement of human civilization. In a Reuters report dated December 15, 1998, Professor Gunther Dreyer noted that Egyptian writing was far more advanced than that of Mesopotamia, at a time when the Sumerians, who were among the first to civilize Mesopotamia, had not yet settled there. This observation highlights that the earliest developments in writing did not occur in Mesopotamia, but in the Nile Valley. This insight challenges the common narrative that civilization began in Europe, Asia, or with the Sumerians in Mesopotamia. Indeed, There is no evidence of any civilization in these regions predating those found in Africa. Such assertions that attribute the beginnings of major developments to Mesopotamia are now considered inaccurate, as it is evident that Africans were already establishing civilizations long before such migrations to Mesopotamia began. Moreover, the belief in Africa as the birthplace of civilization is supported by extensive research and ancient writings, including those of Greek authors. These historical accounts from Greek scholars describe their interactions with people from the Nile Valley, notably the Egyptians and Sudanese, further confirming the advanced state of African civilizations in antiquity. The ancient Greeks had a profound respect for Africa, which they regarded as the cradle of civilization. They used the term Ethiopian to describe African peoples, which means burnt face in Greek, reflecting the dark skin of the inhabitants rather than the modern country of Ethiopia. Greek historians like Diodorus Siculus and Herodotus wrote extensively about Africa's influence on civilization. Diodorus Siculus highlighted that Ethiopians, whom he associated with all of Africa, were among the first humans. He suggested that the southern regions, being closer to the sun, were likely the first populated areas on Earth. He also noted that many Egyptian customs originated from Ethiopia, indicating a cultural flow from the broader African continent into Egypt. Herodotus, another Greek historian, attributed the invention of geometry and the division of the year into 12 parts to the Egyptians, showcasing their advanced understanding of mathematics and astronomy. He also believed that the Egyptians were the first to suggest the immortality of the soul. Moreover, Diodorus mentioned that Ethiopians were pioneers in religious practices, including worship and sacrifices, which were considered especially devout and pleasing to deities. He also credited them with the origins of sculpture and writing. According to the geographer Strabo, buildings in Egypt once housed these Greek scholars as they immersed themselves in the study of celestial phenomena under the guidance of the Egyptian priests. Strabo also mentioned that the Greeks learned the correct length of the year from Egyptian teachings, a knowledge that was later translated into Greek and shared with the wider world. Plato and Pythagoras specifically sought out Egyptian wisdom. Plato lived in Egypt for 13 years, learning alongside Eudoxus at Heliopolis. Pythagoras spent 22 years in Egypt, where he studied astronomy, geometry, and the religious mysteries, significantly shaping his philosophical and scientific ideas. These interactions highlight the depth of Egyptian influence on Greek thought. For instance, the concept of the year divided into 12 parts based on stellar movements was an Egyptian invention that the Greeks adopted. Even the architectural styles, like the columns seen on buildings in Greece today, have their origins in Egyptian design. These historical accounts illustrate that the Greeks themselves credited their Egyptian teachers for many foundational aspects of their knowledge and culture. This acknowledgement shows that Africa, particularly Egypt, was not just a cradle of civilization, but also a significant educational and cultural influence on ancient Greece. These accounts from Greek writers emphasize that, in their view, it was Africans, particularly those they encountered in the Nile Valley, who first developed many foundational aspects of civilization. This included not just spiritual and cultural achievements, but also significant advancements in science and the arts. The historical records show that the origins of many spiritual practices and beliefs that the Greeks adopted can be traced back to Africa, particularly Egypt. According to the ancient historian Diodorus Siculus, the Ethiopians were pioneers in developing forms of worship, including sacrifices and elaborate religious ceremonies. These practices, he noted, made them renowned for their piety across the ancient world. Herodotus, another respected historian, further supports this view by stating that Greece inherited not just the names of its gods, but also key religious rituals and festivals directly from the Egyptians. For instance, he highlighted that significant religious events such as festivals and processions were originally Egyptian innovations that the Greeks later adopted. Further evidence of African influence on Greek spirituality can be seen in art and cultural symbols. For example, depictions of the Greek god Dionysus seated on a leopard, an animal not native to Greece, but common in Africa, suggests that many Greek gods were inspired by or directly copied from African, particularly Egyptian, deities. Herodotus himself acknowledged the deep religiosity of the Egyptians, describing them as the most scrupulously religious of all men, and credited them with the concept of the immortal soul. This acknowledgement by the Greeks of their educational debt to the Africans of the Nile Valley reflects a profound respect and recognition of African contributions to civilization. This perspective challenges the traditional narrative that views Greece as the sole cradle of civilization and underscores the extensive cultural and spiritual influence that Africa, specifically Egypt, had on ancient Greece. Such insights reveal that the celebrated Greek civilization was deeply indebted to African knowledge and teachings, highlighting a more interconnected ancient world than often portrayed. An Austrian Egyptologist, Ahmed Diab, from the University of Klagenfurt, has presented evidence suggesting that the ancient Egyptians, not the Greeks, originally invented the Olympic Games. Diab points to frescoes in tombs located in Alminya, Egypt, which date back to the 21st to 18th centuries BCE. These frescoes show various sports such as wrestling, boxing, archery, rowing, and athletics, which resemble activities in the modern Olympics. Furthermore, he mentions that activities like ball games and running were essential for the Egyptians, citing a depiction of the Queen Pharaoh Hatshepsut as a runner in a Luxor temple. Diab's research challenges the traditional view of the origins of the Olympics, suggesting that ancient Greek civilization may have drawn significant inspiration from Egypt. To the left, we see Amun, also known as Imana or Amen, who was considered the supreme god in ancient Egyptian beliefs. He is shown in the form of a ram, symbolizing protection for Pharaoh Taharka, akin to a parent shielding a child. This imagery of the ram safeguarding its offspring, the lamb, later influenced the Christian symbol of the Lamb of God. On the right, the figure represents Zeus, the chief deity of Greek mythology, also depicted with ram's horns. This illustration suggests that early European cultures were inspired by African religious symbols, such as totemism. Similarly, the totemic worship of the Apis bull in Egypt can be linked to the legend of the Minotaur in Greek mythology. The practice of making libations, still observed in African rituals today, was also a part of ancient Greek ceremonies. Moving on to architecture, the design of Egyptian columns, characterized by their distinct style, was mirrored in the famous Greek structures like the Acropolis. The depiction of figures in Egyptian art, often with clenched fists and one foot forward, was adopted by European artists. To the left, we see an ancient Egyptian depiction of the Last Judgment, where the heart of the deceased is weighed against a feather to determine if they lived a life in harmony with Mahat, the principle of truth and order. This concept parallels the Greek goddess Themis on the right, symbolizing justice, which continues to be represented by scales in Western culture today. Finally, the caduceus, an ancient Egyptian symbol featuring a snake wrapped around a staff, represents medical knowledge. This symbol, associated with the Egyptian god Thoth, is still used widely in the West, including by medical organizations and even the World Health Organization. In the later years of antiquity, as their civilization was in decline, the Egyptians spread the worship of the Virgin Mother Isis, also known as Aisata Mari Amen, across Western Asia and Europe. Isis, the wife of Osiris, whom she resurrected, and mother to Horus, born of a miraculous conception to save creation, became a central figure in their beliefs. The cult of Isis clashed with Saul of Tarsus, later known as Saint Paul, who opposed her followers and adapted elements of this African worship in the creation of the first Christian texts. This adaptation was further developed by the Romans and officially shaped into Christianity by Emperor Constantine in the 4th century. Even the annual celebration of Osiris's rebirth, which involved erecting a tree, was transformed into the Christian festival of Christmas. In regions like northern France along the Seine, places named after Isis, such as Par Isis, enclosure of Isis, or temples of Isis, show the influence of this Egyptian deity. The name Paris itself is derived from this origin. The city's coat of arms from 1811 features Isis at the prow of a ship holding the Ankh, a significant symbol of African spirituality. Isis, originally known as Aissata Mariamen and revered in ancient Egyptian worship, was later transformed by the Romans into the figure now recognized as Mary. Popes, including John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Francis, have all shown reverence towards icons that bear resemblance to Isis, demonstrating the enduring influence of these ancient traditions. The destruction of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century ushered Europe into the Middle Ages, a time of poverty, but also remarkable architectural achievement, including the construction of grand cathedrals. These architectural marvels, such as Notre Dame de Paris, owe their design principles, like the use of the golden ratio, to ancient Egyptian knowledge. This connection was noted by Cameroonian scholar Mbog Basong, highlighting that early Christian monastic communities, starting with Pachomius in 315 AD in Thebes, preserved these architectural traditions. By the 7th century, the Arabs, who had assimilated knowledge from the original inhabitants of Arabia, known as Sabians, began to expand their influence. They entered Africa through Egypt in 640, absorbing much of its knowledge, and soon after, they conquered the Maghreb region. In the early 8th century, the Berber people, referred to as Moors, Saracens, or Haratines, along with the Arabs, pushed into Europe and established a presence in Spain and Portugal that lasted nearly 8 centuries. During the period of Muslim rule in southern Europe, many of the rulers, such as de Marsilius, king of Saragossa in the 8th century, and Abu Abdillah, the last regent king of Granada in the 15th century, were black. This was particularly true during the reigns of the Almoravid and Almohad dynasties, which were predominantly black. Historical illustrations and records from these times, like those housed in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, support this depiction. Descriptions from the era portray Africans as men of deep black complexion, known for their elegance and richly adorned attire. The architectural and cultural contributions from this period are still referred to as Moorish, a term which in Greek and Latin means black rather than Arab. The legacy of the Moors, or Berber blacks of the Maghreb, is profound, with many descendants still present in Europe today, evident in surnames such as Morris, Morris, Morwa, and Moreno, among others. Even Queen Charlotte of England, the grandmother of Queen Victoria and ancestor to the current British royal family, had mixed Moorish ancestry. In Latin America, the terms moreno, morena are commonly used to describe someone with a dark complexion. Moorish civilization stood out as one of the most advanced and refined in Europe during the Middle Ages. At a time when much of Europe struggled with basic hygiene, poverty, epidemics, and widespread illiteracy, the Moors brought significant advancements in science, architecture, and culture, markedly influencing the continent's development. Africans and Arabs made significant contributions to Europe by bringing sciences and arts from across the Muslim Empire, which were then disseminated in Arabic. They established 17 advanced universities, where previously there had only been 2, and set up numerous major bookstores. They were also the first to construct fortified castles, originally an African architectural concept, which became a prominent feature of medieval Europe alongside cathedrals. Cities like Cordoba in Spain flourished under their influence, featuring paved sidewalks, street lighting, and running water in homes. They reintroduced hygiene practices by building public baths and promoting washing twice a day. The Moors revolutionized fashion, changing clothes seasonally, and introducing products like toothpaste, hair removal solutions, and deodorants, innovations credited to Ziryab, a black scholar from Iraq. Ziryab also transformed dining by dividing meals into 3 courses: starters, main course, and dessert. The introduction of castle construction to medieval Europe was another significant Moorish contribution. The dark complexion of the Africans of the Maghreb, including notable figures such as queens and kings, left a lasting impression on Europeans. The numeral system widely used today in the West and around the world, known as Western Arabic numerals, originated from the Arabs, who developed it based on pharaonic Egyptian numerals. These numerals were introduced to Europe and became the most commonly used numeric system. Europeans also rediscovered the writings of their Greek ancestors through Arabic translations, sparking a renewed interest in Greco-Roman antiquity and initiating an intellectual renaissance across the continent. Translation centers for scientific and literary works of the Moors and Arabs were established throughout Europe, further facilitating this cultural revival. In 1492, after ending Muslim rule, the Spanish and Portuguese, now technologically advanced due to their interactions with Africans and Arabs, began their global conquests. This period marked the beginning of a violent spread of European culture, with Spain devastating the Americas and Portugal significantly impacting Africa. The wealth acquired from the enslavement of Africans and colonization fueled Western economic development and innovation, leading to the Industrial Revolution, in which Africans also played a crucial role. Africa, once a cradle of civilization, has experienced significant decline over millennia, primarily due to external conquests and exploitation. The decline began around 2200 years ago with the defeat of Hannibal, the Carthaginian general. At that time, following Greek invasion of Egypt, the Phoenician colony of Carthage in the Maghreb and Spain was a major bearer of the influence of the Black World and Pharaonic civilization. The Romans, having already conquered the Etruscans, went on to destroy Carthage and later Egypt, effectively ending 3,000 years of African dominance in the Mediterranean. After the fall of Carthage, captured in the historical footprint by Hannibal's father, Hamilcar Barca, who founded what is now Barcelona, North Africa, fell under European Christian and then Muslim Arab control. The image of Hannibal on a coin commemorating his victory at Lake Trasimeno remains a rare, authentic depiction of him. Post-Hannibal, Africa's global influence waned, although the continent continued to flourish internally, developing empires such as Ghana, Mali, Benin, Zimbabwe, and Swahili through the 15th century. However, Africa's relatively peaceful states didn't prioritize military advancements, which later contributed to their downfall during the European-led slave trade. This period, intensified by concurrent Arab slave trading and followed by colonial conquests, devastated several African civilizations. This tragic history has been further compounded by efforts to exclude Africans from the broader narrative of human history, an attempt to cement a racial hierarchy established during the slavery era. Rediscovering and embracing African history is crucial for the continent's identity and future progress, echoing the sentiments of figures like Aimé Césaire, who recognized the transformative power of historical awareness. The remarkable influence of ancient African civilizations, from Nubio-Egyptian to contributions in Asia, the Americas, and beyond, underscores Africa's foundational role in world history. This legacy, as highlighted by scholars such as Cheikh Anta Diop, is vital for Africa's reawakening and reclaiming its place in the world. Cheikh Anta Diop, a renowned scholar, once emphasized the significant contributions of Africa to global civilization. He stated, "It is a modest and strict truth that the ancestors of today's Black Africans were pioneers in developing mathematics, astronomy, the calendar, and various sciences. They also made early advancements in the arts, religion, agriculture, social organization, medicine, writing techniques, and architecture." Diop asserted that these contributions, originating from Black Africa, are undeniable facts that cannot be refuted by any credible arguments. His statement highlights the profound and often under-recognized impact that African civilizations have had on the world. Dr. John Henrik Clarke was a prominent historian and scholar who strongly advocated for recognizing the African origins of civilization. He argued that Africa is the birthplace of humanity and, by extension, the cradle of early civilization. Clarke emphasized that many cultural practices, technologies, and philosophical ideas that shaped the world originated in Africa. One of his key opinions was that African history did not start with the arrival of Europeans, but had a rich and dynamic existence long before any external contacts. Clarke believed that Africa's contributions to the world were fundamental in various fields, including religion, science, and art, and that the true extent of these contributions has been largely underappreciated or ignored in mainstream historical narratives. Clarke's work often focused on correcting what he saw as a deliberate distortion of history that minimized Africa's role in the global civilization's narrative. He advocated for a re-examination of history with an honest acknowledgement of Africa's contributions to the development of human societies around the world. We charge you, as a person of African descent, to challenge the deliberate attempt to rewrite our history. We are the original civilizers of this world. Never forget that. Be black and proud.
Nana kabeba yokumayala Nana ijenu mubomita Nana bikoti pula bikandu watolime Pula mebregre metu pula mekanga mebure Aleli bakwe.
Until the lions have their own historians, the tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter.